For Victims and Villains, today we are talking about a movie that is 36 years in the making. My name is Josh. Today we're talking about Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Let's go. Beetlejuice is up to his old tricks again in the long-awaited sequel as he tries to both outrun his wife and makes a deal with Lydia Dietz in order to have her hand in marriage, and, well, shenanigans ensue. I think the question that is going to be on everyone's mind coming into this movie as they try to recapture the nostalgia and cult status of the original Tim Burton classic is this movie worth its nearly 4-decade wait? And the answer is, it's complicated, at least in my opinion. While this movie does recapture the glory of Tim Burton of yesteryear, this movie just kind of stretches itself just a little bit too thin. At its core, this movie has about 4 running plots that are trying to run simultaneously with one another. In one corner, you have Beetlejuice trying to outrun his ex-wife. In one corner, you have the loss of Charles Dietz, and so you have the inevitable grief fallout plot line here. You have Jenna Ortega's love interest subplot. And while we're on the subject of love, we might as well also throw in the love triangle subplot between Keaton, Ryder, and Thoreau. This movie honestly just feels a little bit too busy for its own good sometimes. But there is equally just as much to love here. For one, after nearly 40 years, we get to see Michael Keaton back in the iconic stripes, and I, for one, absolutely loved every single second that he was on the screen. Keaton just has such an infectious energy when he plays this character that it's hard not to be overjoyed and watch this movie with a giant smile on your face. And I had one from the first moment that he pops up on the screen to the hilarious ending of this film. It's really great to also see Catherine O'Hara's character and Winona Ryder's character and kind of where their inevitable arcs ended up and how their relationship has matured from the original 80s classic to now. It was really heartwarming and honestly provided a lot of surprising emotion and surprising heart for this film. And if you guys have listened to Abyss Gazing, then you guys know that we at Abyss Gazing are huge fans of practical effects. And it's been a very long time since we've seen a major studio release tackle practical effects. And honestly, if there's anything that warms my heart about this film, it has to be Tim Burton's not only signature style, but also the fact that this is a practical effect-driven film. And that's not to say that there aren't a couple of shots here and there with digital effects in here, but the practical effects are the real stars here, right alongside Keaton. And that's honestly a beautiful place to be. I know a lot of these legacy sequels that we're starting to see come up in recent years are trying to stick within the original confinements or pacing of the film, which they are a legacy sequel to. But honestly, Beetlejuice is one of those films, especially with Beetlejuice Beetlejuice and the ambitious story that Tim Burton and gang are trying to tell here. This is a movie that I think honestly could have benefited from an additional 15 to 20 minutes to kind of flesh out a lot of these storylines. As I talked about earlier in the video, a lot of the busyness of the narrative really creates kind of not only awkward transitions, but also at the same time, just really, really frustrating pacing. I really do love the comedy here, and of course, this film really does have a very large heart and explores very deep themes that we're going to talk about right now in mental health. But before that, I'm ready to run Beetlejuice Beetlejuice through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Beetlejuice a 3.5 out of 5. I think this movie, for the most part, works really well. There are some pacing issues, and the narrative does feel a little bit overstuffed at times, but there's a lot to love here as well. It's really rewarding getting to see where the Catherine O'Hara and Winona Ryder character ended up and how their relationship has aged from the 80s to now. Also, it's fantastic to see Michael Keaton back. He does an exceptional job, and the practical effects and signature design of Tim Burton are just absolutely to die for. This movie is a lot of fun. Well, as promised, let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. And for this one, I really think it's important to highlight how this film approaches the subject of grief. It shouldn't be any surprise to anyone if you've seen the trailers for this movie, then you know that this film obviously addresses the death of Charles Dietz, and his death is felt profoundly throughout the course of this movie. In some ways, you get to see how different characters react to his death, and it's a beautiful thing. Jenna Ortega kind of keeps to herself following his death, but the Catherine O'Hara approach to grief is really what I want to talk about, and really what I think is deserving of the most conversation out of any grieving practice in this film. Societally speaking, I think we have a very closed-minded idea of the grieving process and what constitutes as the right or wrong way to grieve. What I love about the O'Hara character journey and the grieving process in here is that she turns to art and creative endeavors to not only express herself, but to explore the grief. This is really out of the box way that challenges our notions of how an individual can grieve. And it comes back to this point that we've made on this channel, as well as the content that we've published in our podcast network several times, is that there is no right or wrong way to grieve. Everyone's going to grieve in their own manner, time, and fashion, really. I gave 2 examples just from this film alone about how one character wants to be alone and explore her emotions, whereas you have another character that is turning to the arts and creativity ventures to process the same exact grief of the same individual. What it comes down to is that grief does not have a right or wrong way. How you process grief or the time that you take is not limited to the other person or other people in your life that have gone through the same either grieving process over the same individual or similar circumstances. We all heal in our own time. And if you don't know where to start and you're currently going through the grieving process, in the show notes below, there's a link to help you with our mental health resource library. You will find links down there that can help you go through just general mental health stuff or some more deeper and maybe even perhaps more niche circumstances as well. If you guys have seen Beetlejuice, what did you think? Comment below and let me know. Did it live up to the hype? Did it live up to the wait? Did it live up to the original? In the show notes below, you guys will find links to all of our social media, our podcast network, more movie reviews like this, our mental health resource library, and ways to support financially to help our mental health education efforts through Patreon and that subscribe button. So until next time, remember to keep it classy. And remember, it's okay if you say his name twice, just don't say it 3 times. Bad stuff happens when you say his name 3 times.